Late at night, in the heart of a quiet African village, an ominous pounding echoed through the stillness. It wasn't the sound of preparation for a feast or the rhythmic work of a farmer. No, this pounding carried a darker meaning. Villagers whispered in hushed tones, speaking of Bako, the farmer who had lost everything. But what they didn't know was that his obsession with grief and loss would soon claim another victim. His own daughter, Amina. Amina was just 12 years old, full of life and curiosity, but she couldn't ignore the strange things happening in her home. Ever since her mother passed away under mysterious circumstances, her father had changed. He barely spoke to her, spent long nights in his hut, and every evening, the pounding began. Loud, deliberate, and haunting. The villagers avoided their family, whispering stories of rituals and curses, but no one dared confront Bako. Amina, however, couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. One night, she decided to find out for herself. She crept out of her room and peered through a small crack in the wooden wall that separated her from her father's workspace. What she saw sent chills down her spine. Her father, drenched in sweat, was pounding something in a large mortar. Beside him was a sack that moved slightly, as if something was alive inside. "It must be done," Bako muttered, his voice low and strained. "She must be the one." Amina's heart raced. Who was he talking about? What was inside the sack? Fear gripped her, but she knew she had to uncover the truth. The next day, as Biko sent Amina to fetch water from the stream, she overheard the villagers talking. "Did you hear the pounding again last night?" one woman asked. "It's unnatural," another replied. "Ever since his wife died, Bako hasn't been the same. And what about the children who've gone missing? Do you think it's connected?" Amina's chest tightened. Missing children? Could her father be involved? At the stream, Amina noticed something strange lodged between the rocks downstream. A small bundle wrapped in tattered cloth. She waded into the water and retrieved it, her fingers trembling. Inside, she found a wooden figurine, strange herbs, and a piece of fabric she recognized. It had belonged to one of the missing children, and the children had used it to make the wheel that turned the tire truck onto its rubber. Before she could process the discovery, her father appeared on the riverbank. His voice was sharp, his eyes cold. "What are you doing?" I thought I saw something in the water," Amina stammered. "Leave it, come home now." His tone left no room for argument, and she obeyed. But her mind raced with fear and suspicion. That night, the pounding resumed, louder and more forceful than ever. Amina couldn't take it anymore. She tried to remember anything. She sneaked into her father's room while he was distracted and lifted the lid of the mortar. What she saw made her stomach churn. Bone fragments, clumps of hair, and powders that smelled of death. She backed away, horrified, but her father caught her. His face, once gentle and kind, was now twisted with desperation. "You weren't supposed to see this," he said, his voice trembling. "Papa, what are you doing?" Amina cried. "Papa, what are you doing?" Amina cried. This is for your mother," he replied. "She isn't gone, Amina. The ritual will bring her back. But the spirits demand a sacrifice." "A sacrifice?" Amina's voice broke as realization dawned on her. "You mean me?" Bako nodded, tears streaming down his face. "You're all I have left. I have no choice." Amina fled, her tears blinding her as she ran to the home of Mama Zainab, the village elder. Mama Zainab listened quietly as Amina poured out her story. Then, with a grave expression, she said, "The ritual he's performing is forbidden. It binds spirits to the living world, but it demands a life in exchange. If he completes it, you will die. Your soul will be worthless." He pointed to the woman before him. "Amina," he said, "slowly approach. Amina, also, she will die. The only way to stop it is to destroy the mortar before the final strike." That night, Amina hid in the shadows, watching as her father prepared for the ritual. The pounding was deafening, each strike shaking the ground. He chanted in a language she didn't understand, his voice growing louder and more desperate. Summoning all her courage, Amina crept forward, clutching a heavy stone she had found outside. Her hands trembled as she neared the mortar. Just as her father raised the pestle for the final strike, she smashed the mortar with all her strength. The room erupted in chaos. A deafening roar filled the air, and the walls seemed to shake. Shadows swirled around them, forming grotesque shapes. "You have defied us," a deep, otherworldly voice boomed. Amina stood her ground, her heart pounding. "You cannot have me. I am not your sacrifice." The spirits hesitated, their presence dimming slowly. But then they turned their fury on Baka. "The pact has been broken," the voice thundered. "But the price must still be paid." Bako knelt before the spirits, his face filled with regret. "Take me instead," he whispered. Before Amina could stop him, her father was gone, swallowed by the shadows. The room fell silent, the air heavy with loss. The villagers spoke of that night for years, the night the pounding stopped and the spirits were finally appeased. Amina, though heartbroken, found solace in her father's final act of redemption. She buried the shattered pieces of the mortar deep in the forest, vowing never to let such darkness take hold again. Years later, Amina became a healer, using her knowledge to help others. But every so often,